I've gone 19 years without ever watching Hunter x Hunter. I mean, yeah, I've seen some clips here and then, but never actually sat down to watch one full episode, arc, season, whatever you want to call it. Which is kind of impressive considering how often people actually recommend it to me. But seriously, if you ask almost any anime fan for a list of must watch shows, Hunter x Hunter is almost always near the top. And every single time I'd ask them, okay, but what actually makes it so good, you know? I'd always get the exact same answer, which is just watch it, just watch it. So I finally decided that it's time, and I'm gonna bring you guys along with me. Okay, maybe not actually bring you guys along with me. I've decided that instead of just binging the show in silence, I want to do something a little different. I don't want the series to be a reaction channel where I pause every 30 seconds, and I definitely don't want it to be a scene by scene recap either. Instead, I want this to feel like you guys are rewatching Hunter x Hunter for the very first time, but sort of living vicariously through my eyes. I'm going to pick out different things that I like, that I want to talk about, and just kind of go through my kind of thought process while watching the show. I'm going to be taking notes while I watch, making predictions before I know what's coming, and just overall trying to figure out who's lying, who's hiding something, and probably making some absolutely terrible theories along the way. So without further ado, let's finally see what all the hype is about. Okay, so going into this, I honestly thought I knew exactly what Hunter x Hunter was. You know, strong kid with a big dream, does some pretty cool fights, but then eventually gets some crazy power system. Pretty standard shonen stuff, right? Absolutely not, because 2 episodes in, I'm not even sure I know what a hunter is. But like, actually, are they bounty hunters, explorers, government agents, mercenaries, or even superheroes? Whatever the case is, apparently being one is important enough for Gon's dad to literally leave his family behind. But somehow, he looks up to that and goes, yeah, I actually really want to do that too. Like, what? How could you even think that? I mean, I guess this is just where this anime is going so far, I don't know. And the first thing Hunter x Hunter does is introduce me to a tiny little Peter Pan looking kid on a tree named Gon, holding a fishing rod as if it's about to reel him in. And within about 5 minutes, the kid actually catches a fish that's even bigger than he is. Now, normally I'd probably just write that off as anime logic, you know, plot armor and stuff, except everyone around him acts like this isn't completely impossible. Because apparently, his dad actually managed to do the exact same thing when he was around Gon's age. And now I'm wondering, who the hell is his dad and how is he strong enough to do that at such a young age? They're both the same age doing the same thing. But if this is the baseline, I genuinely can't wait to see how strong hunters get. And the music, it immediately stood out to me too. Doesn't really feel dark or give off those Death Note vibes. It doesn't really feel action heavy like a solo leveling type. It feels more adventurous, almost playful in a way. But anyways, Gon boards the ship to head towards the hunter exam, and immediately these haters start hating on him. He's too young, too small, probably too weak. At least that's what all those weirdos seem to think on the boat. But then we meet two people that immediately felt important. You know, colored hair, different outfits. Usually the sign of them being an important character. And that's when we met Kurapika and Leorio. Kurapika is somehow managing to sound mysterious every single time he opens his mouth, and Leorio just looks like your average comic relief stupid character, but I guess we'll see how that evolves. But then again, these two start throwing hands with each other until Gon spits some absolute ball knowledge to the captain, and he says, if you want to know somebody, find out what makes them angry. It's such a simple line, but if I'm being honest, that correlates to my everyday life. So it was pretty interesting seeing how a kid is more mature than these two adults. Ish. And while they were fighting, because Leorio decided to, you know, diss his dead family, a kid gets thrown by a storm into the ocean, and while those two stop their fight to save them, Gon jumps for his life to save the kid, knowing that those two would actually save him. So I'm thinking, how the hell is all of this happening and they're not even at the exam site yet? But then eventually, they come to notice that the exam already started. The captain wasn't just driving the boat, he was watching everyone who got seasick, who helped people, who even stayed calm, and who was willing to risk themselves for somebody else. When I realized that, the entire perspective changed. Every random interaction felt important and judged for some reason. And somehow, the next episode doubles down on that. Instead of throwing them into some giant tournament or like a fight, they're sent through what basically feels like one huge quest. They get some really bad information online for where the exam actually is, and Leorio chooses to follow it, knowing that the captain told Gon exactly where the location was. They fight about who's right, and then Gon seems to be going the correct way, and then comes the old woman's impossible question. And honestly, I tried answering it myself, and there's absolutely no way I'm able to choose between my son or my daughter. I mean, maybe I pick son, but then Kurapika realizes there's not even a correct answer. And he realizes the question isn't the test, it's whether they understand what it's like to be a hunter. And honestly, just based off the fact that Gon and Leorio couldn't really put those pieces together, I have a feeling that Kurapika is going to be the more smart one out of the trio, but I could be wrong. So they finally pass the first screening, but then we get to the cabin. And at first I thought, okay, finally, here's the monster fight, which is pretty insane only because all the weapons I've seen so far is Kone's fishing rod, Kurapika's sticks, and Leorio straight up trying to shank somebody. But unfortunately, it's not really a fight. It's another test. And it's given by these identical monsters, who apparently Gon can differentiate by their voice and by their appearance, but if I'm being honest, they look the exact same and sound the exact same. So I'm not really sure how he did that. But in the end, none of them pass because they're stronger or more powerful. They pass because each of them reveals something about who they are. Gon passing for his exceptional observational and physical skills, Kurapika passing for his insane perception and knowledge, and Leorio passes not for his observation, but for his empathy and medical skills. And they all pass screening number 2. But the thing that hit me later on was that I don't think they're asking who's the strongest. At least not yet, anyways. I think they're asking who deserves to become a hunter. Because in the last few screenings, all they've shown is character. They haven't shown power levels, they haven't shown agility, and they sure as hell haven't shown any power scaling system. So I really wonder what it takes to become a hunter, especially now, since they haven't even started the exam.
Now, going into these episodes, I really thought that the Hunter exam was finally about to start, but it turns out I still actually had no idea what kind of show I was watching, because somehow the entrance to one of the hardest exams in the world is in a ramen shop? I mean, I love that trick. I really got baited by the giant building pretty much like everybody else, but it also made me start thinking, how big is the Hunter Association if they've got hundreds, if not thousands of people taking the Hunter exam? Also, this was the first little Gon moment that actually stuck with me. Everybody else just kind of walks past the guide and just doesn't really acknowledge him, but Gon actually thanks him. It's such a really small thing, but I feel like it explains why people naturally like him. He's not trying to be the nicest guy in the room, it's just kind of who he is. And once they enter the shop's secret dining room by using the password, they descend to the actual Hunter exam location, in which they meet the other exam takers, people who have come as far as they have and wish to become hunters, which is when they first meet a middle-aged guy named Tompa, and he casually says that he's taken the Hunter exam 35 times, which is a question that actually kept coming up. Every single person in the show so far has a completely different reason for becoming a hunter. Gon wants to find his dad, Leorio wants money, and Kurapika has his own personal mission to defeat the Phantom Troop. Nobody really agrees on what a hunter even is, or what they should be, which makes me think that there probably isn't one answer. Now I think here's where things actually get good, because Hisoka shows up, and I think this is the first moment where I realized there might actually be a power system, because up until now, I thought everyone just fought with whatever weapon they brought. Gon had his fishing rod, Leorio had his knife, Kurapika had his sticks, but then this guy walks in with playing cards and somehow blows a dude's arms off, like disintegrates them. I still don't really know exactly what he did, but after that scene I stopped looking at fights the same way. It feels like there's something bigger going on that they just haven't explained yet, so I really can't wait to see what that is. And once phase 1 actually started, I was waiting for everyone to at least start fighting or do something of interest, but then they just started running. At first, I thought it was kind of underwhelming. Like, actually, this is the hunter exam. We're just jogging. But the longer it went on, the more I actually liked it. It wasn't really about speed. It was seeing who panicked and who gave up. It was an endurance test. And then we meet Killua. And if I'm being honest, he's probably my second or tied for a first favorite character in terms of looks so far. Just because as someone that skates, I respect it. If they're not going to tell me that I can't use it, why would I run if I have a skateboard with me? So I was actually really surprised that they allowed it. And while Killua and Gon were getting to know each other, I noticed that they're not really normal kids. They look around the same age, yeah, and somehow they're keeping pace with adults that have probably been training their entire lives. So at this point, I didn't really know what Kilo's deal was, but you can already tell he wasn't just another background character. And just when the show started picking up the pace, Leorio started being exhausted and slowing down. I thought he was going to be eliminated. He completely lost his rhythm, started falling behind, and then somehow found another gear out of nowhere. I don't really know where that sprint came from, even though you can probably assume that his ego got hurt by two kids outrunning him, but I'll give him some credit. But one of the parts that I liked so far most was that Gon actually turned around to wait for him. Nobody told him to, and he hadn't really known him long enough to actually care. He just didn't want to leave him behind. That's probably my favorite thing about Gon so far. He's strong, but that almost feels secondary. His main character energy and personality stands out way more than anything he's actually done in the exam so far. Something really cool that happens though is that around this point we finally get to hear a better idea of why everyone's here, especially Oreo, because I thought he was only really going for it to get rich, but turns out it's a lot deeper than that. When he tells the story about losing a friend because they couldn't afford treatment, it completely changed how I looked at him. He's obviously still obsessed with money, but it actually makes sense now. It's not the money itself, it's what having money would have changed. And then you kind of compare that to Kurapika, whose entire motivation is basically revenge. I'm still confused about one thing though, if I'm being honest. If the Phantom Troop wiped out his whole clan, how did he survive? Did he escape? Did he run away? Or was he never even there? I hope they explain that later because that was the first question I had whenever he mentioned how powerful they were and that they murdered his entire clan. Then Gon talks about his father, and honestly, I don't really know how to feel about Jean. Everyone keeps saying and talking about him like he's this legendary hunter, but from Gon's perspective, he wasn't even there. And I understand that Gon wants to find him. I just don't know if I'd be that excited to meet him personally, but I guess that's the whole point of the story. And after what felt like forever, they finally make it to the end of the tunnel. And I'm thinking, alright, phase one's finally over, right? Nope. They open the doors and there's an entire swamp waiting for them, which honestly spiked another question from me. I wonder if they seriously ran that far, because when we started underground, we were in some huge city, and now we're in what looks like the middle of nowhere. And then this fake examiner shows up, but for a second I actually believed him, I was thinking, yeah, that kinda makes sense, right? But then Hisoka immediately throws cards at the both of them. And I actually liked how he figured out who the real examiner was, because he didn't ask questions, he didn't wait for someone else to solve it, he tested the both of them instantly. And in his mind, if the fake one dies, the real one catches the cards. And that's the only answer he really needed, which is probably the smartest thing Hisoka has done so far, and he's slowly getting to the top of my favorite character list. Once they got into the wetlands, I think this is when the hunter exam finally stopped feeling like a competition and started feeling like survival. Up until now, people had dropped out because they simply couldn't keep up. Now, people were actually dying. The monsters in this place were actually pretty cool too. I like that they weren't just giant animals, they were tricking people. One fake voice in the fog and people were just gone. It makes you realize the exam isn't always about beating something stronger than you. Sometimes it's about not making a stupid decision. Then Hisoka gets jumped by a whole bunch of applicants, and honestly, I don't really know what they were thinking, mostly because every time somebody challenges this guy, it goes exactly how you'd expect. I do have to say though, his choice of weapon is probably my favorite so far. He carries around a whole bunch of playing cards and somehow makes them look terrifying. I don't really know how they work yet, but honestly, that's making me like him even more. But then Leorio decides, yeah, I got this. And if I'm being honest, I respect the confidence, but there was never a point where I actually thought he had a chance. But then Gon jumping in with a fishing rod, that was pretty cool. Mostly because I didn't really think he was gonna win, but he didn't even hesitate, especially against somebody as powerful as Hisoka. And at this point, he's still probably one of the weakest people left, and he's still willing to step in, just makes his character step out even more. But this whole interaction between Gon and Hisoka was just weird. Not confusing, but just weird. This guy keeps calling Gon a good boy, talking about how much potential he has, but then 5 seconds later he's choking him. I really don't understand what Hisoka wants or how he acts around these kids, but it's pretty interesting. Which boggles my mind because I don't know if he's actually a villain or not. Because literally right after beating everyone up, he carries Leorio to the next phase. I don't know if he's helping them, if he's testing them on his own scale, or whether he does whatever he feels like. I have absolutely no clue. And by the time they finished phase 1, there were only 50 people left, which is insane when you think about where they started. Half of the people didn't lose, they just couldn't survive the Hunter exam. And that was part 1 of the Hunter exams. I honestly had a lot of fun making this, and if you enjoyed watching it, please let me know what you thought down in the comments. Since this is my first time making content like this, your feedback really helps me figure out what to improve on and where to take the series next. If you want to follow along as I experience Hunter x Hunter for the first time, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. And one last thing, please don't spoil anything. I'm actually way too invested at this point, and I'd love to experience the story the same way you all did for the first time. Alright, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye!